She hasn't said a word in days. No texts, no eye contact, just space and silence. And that silence, it doesn't just speak, it screams. Not about her, but about you. Most men hear that silence and panic. They treat it like a puzzle to be solved, a threat to neutralize, or a test to pass. But the truth is quieter and far more dangerous. Her silence isn't distance, it's measurement. She's not walking away. She's watching who you are when no one's clapping, no one's reacting, and nothing is being said. That's not absence. That's assessment. She's scanning your center to see if there's anything real left in you, or if your voice is the only thing holding you together. Silence, for men like us, isn't unfamiliar. It's ancestral. It's not just something we endure, it's something we inherited. For many, it began early. The mother who was there, then gone. The praise that came with performance. The attention that left when we stopped trying. We learned young that silence meant danger, that it meant we did something wrong, that we were about to be punished, left, forgotten. So when a woman goes quiet, we don't see stillness. We see abandonment. We don't feel space. We feel threat. But that response isn't coming from your masculine core. It's coming from the boy who never had emotional structure. The boy who thought love had to be earned and could be lost in a heartbeat. And now that boy lives inside a man who still thinks her silence is about worth. But here's the truth most won't say aloud. You're not afraid of her silence. You're afraid of your own. You're afraid of who you are when there's nothing left to react to. No text to decode. No arguments to win. Just stillness. Just you. And that's the real test. The test isn't whether you can make her speak again. It's whether you can stand in your own center without needing her sound to validate your shape. Zeno of Citium didn't found Stoicism after conquering an empire. He built it after a shipwreck, after losing everything, after being stripped of noise, applause, identity. It wasn't in conversation that he became clear. It was in observation, in silence, in watching the world fall and not falling with it. Her silence is your shipwreck. What stays quiet inside you when everything else feels unstable. That's your foundation. That's the man you're becoming, or the man you keep avoiding. Seneca once said, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage, but for us, sometimes just staying silent is the truest form of masculinity. Not because we have nothing to say, but because we no longer need to prove we're right. We're not performing, we're not chasing, we're holding the storm, holding the ground, holding ourselves. And that takes more courage than any outburst ever could." So this video, it's not about how to manipulate her into speaking. It's not about reading between the lines or winning some imagined emotional battle. It's about something far older, far deeper. It's about letting go of the idea that your presence needs to be verified to have value. It's about learning to be unmoved, because stillness isn't weakness, it's command. And the man who can stand still in silence commands far more than words ever could. You're not here to pass her test. You're here to remember that you no longer need to, because real strength, real masculine gravity, it's when you can be fully seen without saying a thing, when your posture speaks what your mouth never has to, when your silence isn't a response to hers, but a discipline you've chosen long before she pulled away. Let's begin. She pulls away, maybe not physically, but emotionally. Short replies, delayed messages, a gaze that used to soften now passes right through you. And what do most men do? They chase, they explain, they ask if everything's okay. They try to fix what hasn't even been named. That scramble, that panic, it's not strength, it's not leadership, it's noise. And she sees it. Worse, she feels it. Not as love, not as presence, but as instability. You think if you don't act, you'll lose her. But the truth is, your reaction is what's making her lose respect. Masculine energy doesn't move like that. It doesn't react to every shadow on the wall. It doesn't seek reassurance from the very person who's withdrawn it. That isn't connection. It's dependence dressed up as concern. She's not just hearing your words, she's watching how you handle not being received. That's the real dialogue. The brain is a pattern-seeking machine. When something feels off, it searches, analyzes, creates meaning, even where none exists. In relationships, that often becomes obsession. You replay her silence, read it 10 different ways, assume blame, anticipate rejection. But here's what that does to you. It dismantles your center. It turns silence into suffering, not because of her, but because of what you project into the gap. Overcompensation always backfires, because it shows her you can't hold your ground without constant approval. It reveals a man who leads when he's heard, but crumbles when he's not. That isn't power, that's performance. And no woman respects a man whose calm disappears the moment hers does. Silence isn't your enemy, but your relationship to it might be. The goal is not to feel nothing, it's to remain unmoved by what doesn't belong to you. You don't need to solve her quiet. You need to respect yours. Because masculine silence isn't absence, it's assertion. It says, I'm here, whether you look or not. And when that presence is real, when it's not pretending, not panicking, not persuading, it changes everything. You stop chasing because there's nothing to catch. You stop explaining because your actions already align. You stop decoding because your value was never written in her behavior to begin with. What's calm on the outside must be rooted within. Otherwise, it's just decoration. And women, especially the ones worth leading, see through decoration. She's not looking for your reaction. She's looking for your rhythm. And if your rhythm breaks when she pulls back, then you were never leading. You were following her cues, not your principles. That's the invisible mistake. And for men who live in noise, it's often the last one they recognize. Some wounds don't shout, they whisper. They don't show up in fights or breakdowns. They show up in the quiet moments, when someone you love goes silent and you collapse inside. Not because they said anything cruel, but because they didn't say anything at all. For many men, that moment doesn't begin with a woman. It began years ago, long before they had the words to explain it. If you grew up around emotional inconsistency, if the love you received was measured, delayed, or withdrawn, you didn't just learn how to feel, you learned how to scan. You became hyper-attuned to silence. Because silence often meant something was about to break. It meant you had to fix, perform, or prove. That silence wasn't space. It was a threat. And every time it happened, you became less of a person and more of a mirror, trying to reflect what others wanted just to stay safe. So now, when a woman you care about pulls back, that boy wakes up. The one who was never taught that silence can be neutral. The one who believed that every quiet moment was a countdown to abandonment. You start pacing in your mind, trying to earn back peace you never broke. And the worst part, you don't even realize it's not about her. It's about your blueprint. Stoicism isn't about shutting down. It's about grounding, about rewiring that inherited impulse to chase every emotional shift as if your identity depends on it. When you embrace Stoic masculinity, you stop reading silence as punishment. You start seeing it for what it is, information, not always about you. Sometimes just space, sometimes confusion, sometimes testing, but never a verdict on your worth. Emotional architecture is rarely taught to men. We're taught to achieve, provide, endure, but we're rarely shown how to sit still with ourselves when no one is reaching back. That's the muscle most men lack, not strength, not courage, but inner structure. A frame that can hold silence without falling into fear. A heart that doesn't interpret absence as a wound. A mind that doesn't beg for confirmation just to feel real. This isn't about intellect. It's not about knowing what she's thinking or decoding her mood. It's about rebuilding the part of you that believes silence is survival. It's not. It's just silence. And once you stop reacting to it like it's an alarm, you begin to discover something deeper, presence without panic. You become a man who can hold emotional space, not just for her, but for yourself. Because the truth is, if her silence breaks you, it was never her presence that made you whole. It was your dependency on it. And that's not love, that's imbalance. When you find calm in her silence, you don't just pass a test, you change your foundation. You stop being the boy who needed answers, and you become the man who doesn't. It didn't start with silence. It started with a shift, a smaller smile, a colder tone, a delay in her eyes when she looked at you. Nothing obvious, nothing loud, just a slow fade, like color draining from a photograph. And you, trying to keep things together, didn't see it for what it was. You told yourself she was just tired, stressed, needing space. But deep down, something in you already knew. She had pulled back, not out of spite but out of grief. Not over what you did, but over who you stopped being. That's the part no one talks about. Respect doesn't disappear overnight. It dies slowly. When a man who once led with calm presence starts leading with need, when he starts proving, pleading, performing. She doesn't leave because she hates you. She leaves because she no longer sees the man who once made her feel safe in silence. There's a story most men live and never tell. the one where he tries to win her back. In the exact moment she's silently wondering why he fell so far. He brings flowers. She nods. He plans a dinner. She checks her phone. He says all the right things, but she's not listening to the words. She's watching the energy beneath them, and what she sees isn't power. It's panic. He thinks he's fighting for her, but what he's really doing is trying to fight the mirror she's holding up, the mirror that shows how far he's drifted from his own center. When a woman pulls back, it's not always manipulation. Sometimes it's observation. She's not punishing you, she's watching if the man she once respected can still hold himself when the applause stops, watching if his silence is steady, or if it fractures the moment he's not being seen, and if he responds with over-explaining, over-promising, or emotional noise, the respect erodes further, not because he's unworthy, but because he's no longer rooted. She stopped respecting you the day you stopped respecting your silence, the day you made her mood your compass instead of your own integrity, the day your presence became a reaction, not a position. That moment didn't come with fireworks. It came in silence, and you missed it because you were too busy trying to be heard. The solution isn't in louder declarations, it's in quieter strength, in returning to the place where your value isn't determined by her gaze, but by your stillness in its absence. When you stop chasing her attention and start living in alignment with who you were before her silence ever mattered, that's when she sees it. That's when she remembers. And if she doesn't, then you haven't lost her. You've just found yourself. She steps back. You lean forward. She withholds. You pour more. And without realizing it, you've given her the frame, not because she asked for control, but because you gave it away the moment you tried to fill the space she left. That reaction, the instinct to restore peace, to seek clarity, to pull her close, feels noble. It feels romantic. But beneath it, something quieter is breaking. Your emotional authority. When you let her silence dictate your behavior, you become emotionally replaceable. Because now your mood mirrors hers. Your stability depends on hers. You've stopped being the mountain and started becoming the weather. And no woman, no matter how lost or loving, feels safe with a man whose internal state shifts with hers. That's not partnership. That's emotional outsourcing. You were meant to lead, not by force, not with control, but by consistency. Real leadership in a relationship doesn't mean fixing her silence. It means remaining grounded within it. When you lose that posture, you communicate one thing. Your voice holds more weight than my center. And over time, that erodes attraction. Not because you're not trying, but because trying becomes the problem. This doesn't mean you turn cold. It means you turn inward. You manage your own orbit. You make decisions from alignment, not approval. Because when your actions are reactions, your presence becomes negotiable. It's no longer a force, it's a plea. The inner fortress. That's where your value is rebuilt. Not by resisting her silence, but by holding yours. By remembering that stillness isn't passive, it's powerful. It's a message. It says I can hold tension without demanding relief. And that's rare. That's magnetic. That's masculine. When she withdraws, let her. Observe her rhythm without abandoning your own. Show her, not with words, but with calm, that your peace wasn't borrowed from her attention, that your worth didn't come from how close she stood to you. And if she walks further, you let her, not in anger, not in spite, but in stillness. Because the moment you react, you make her silence about you. And it's not. It never was. It's hers. But your reaction, that's your responsibility. That's your test. And if you pass it, not with control, but with composure, you'll no longer need to be chosen. You'll have already chosen yourself. Stillness doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means you've learned not to feed what doesn't serve you. In a world where most people respond immediately, text for text, mood for mood, your silence becomes a language all its own. And when a woman goes silent, what you do next doesn't just affect the moment. It defines the man you're becoming. To react is easy. To sit in discomfort without reaching for explanation, justification, or validation, that takes structure. And not the kind you show in your posture or your paycheck, the kind that lives in your breath, in your eyes, in the pause between her withdrawal and your need to respond. That's where your leadership is tested, not by what you say, but by how long you can stay silent without feeling like you're losing something. Your calm communicates far more than words ever could. It tells her you're not afraid of space. You don't crumble in quiet. You don't need noise to feel seen. That kind of energy doesn't chase. It doesn't prove. It doesn't flinch. It simply holds. And holding, in silence, becomes the loudest presence in the room. Epictetus once said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." That includes how she might see you when you don't react, when you don't rush to fix the atmosphere, when you don't try to decode the unspoken. She may see it as cold. She may test harder, but none of that matters. What matters is your shape under pressure, because a man who breaks his own frame just to reassure someone else was never leading to begin with. When you remain still, you give her something rare, the mirror of her own silence. You don't chase it, you don't fill it, you reflect it. And in that reflection, she meets her own expectations. Not your panic. That's not indifference. That's discipline. That's direction. That's dignity. Your non-reaction isn't void of emotion. It's proof that your emotions are no longer running the show. It's not about being cold. It's about being composed. The kind of composed that makes her wonder, not because you're playing a game, but because you're no longer playing at all. You've stepped off the stage. You've stopped performing. You've remembered who you were before her silence became significant. And when you hold that space without shaking, you don't just earn her curiosity, you reclaim your own power, quietly, unapologetically, without explanation. There's a moment many men don't realize they've crossed. It's the moment silence stops being a space and starts becoming a weapon. You feel her distance, you sense the withdrawal, and instead of anchoring yourself, you engage, not with violence, but with subtle retaliation, cold shoulders, measured tone, calculated responses, not because you're calm, but because you're trying to match her energy. And in doing that, you've already lost yours. When silence becomes a power game, it reveals the fear underneath, not strength, not strategy, fear. Because if you were truly grounded, her behavior wouldn't dictate your mood. You wouldn't need to respond with mirrored coldness. You'd simply remain, still, present, disengaged from the dance. But instead, you enter the arena, thinking silence is something to win. And what she feels in that moment isn't masculinity, it's emotional excess in disguise. Women don't respect dominance displays that come from insecurity. They sense the performance behind your quiet. They feel the tension in your restraint. Because it's not stillness, it's strain. And they know the difference. One is a man who needs no confirmation to remain composed. The other is a man waiting for applause to validate his silence. One is power. The other is panic, dressed in self-control. You don't earn respect by showing you can match her withdrawal. You earn it by showing her that your energy isn't reactive, that her silence doesn't activate war. It activates awareness. You begin to see what she's really saying by not saying anything. You stop making it about control, and you start using it as reflection. Redirection is the key. Use her distance not to provoke her, but to recalibrate. Ask yourself, not what she's doing, but how steady you remain when nothing external agrees with your internal clarity. That's the real measure of presence. Not how you behave when you're received, but how you hold when you're not. Discipline doesn't just appear when tested. It's revealed. You don't gain it in conflict. You carry it into conflict. And when you can hold it in silence, without trying to win or punish or prove, you stop playing her game. You start living yours. Let her be distant. Let her be unsure. Let her be silent. None of that defines your voice unless you allow it. And the man who refuses to turn silence into a battlefield is the one she will either return to with respect or walk away from, knowing she couldn't shake him. Either way, he wins. Quietly, without noise, without war. At some point, every man reaches a moment that doesn't look like a decision, but is. She's silent. The atmosphere is heavy. Nothing is resolved, and yet, you stop chasing clarity, not because you've given up, but because you've remembered something deeper. Your value doesn't live in the outcome. It lives in the man you continue to be when the outcome stays unknown. You don't need her to speak to know where you stand. You don't need a label to justify your posture, because dignity isn't earned through her reassurance. It's revealed when you no longer ask for it. That's the moment. Quiet, unannounced, but real. The shift from seeking to standing, from performing to simply being. You don't pass her test by finding the right thing to say. You pass it by not needing the conversation to validate your worth. That doesn't mean you're indifferent. It means you've stopped outsourcing your peace. And once you've reclaimed that, truly reclaimed it, her silence becomes irrelevant. Because if she respects you, that stillness you've held will draw her back. Not with urgency, but with recognition. a quiet return to the gravity you never lost. And if she doesn't come back, then your silence has already done its job. It protected your integrity. It revealed that you're no longer the man who explains his soul just to keep someone from leaving. That you've stopped begging for someone to acknowledge your presence. Because now, your presence acknowledges itself. That's self-respect. Not loud, not proud, just steady. A calm in your bones that doesn't ask for validation. A knowing that isn't tied to reaction. A decision made not out of spite, but alignment. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to explain it. You just walk differently. You breathe differently. You look at yourself in the mirror without the questions that used to haunt you. Not because everything's been answered, but because you've stopped needing answers to keep moving. She might notice, she might not, but you will. And once you do, no silence will ever shake you the same way again. Because you've chosen, quietly, finally. And the man who makes that choice doesn't lose, even if she never speaks again. You thought you were being tested by her silence, but it was never about her. It was always about you, about your dependence on signals, your hunger for confirmation, your need to hear something, anything, to feel seen. That's the test, not her withdrawal, but your reaction to it. And if you've listened this far, you already know. The test wasn't about passing. It was about remembering what silence reveals, not about her, but about who you are without her attention. Zeno of Citium didn't find truth in conversation. He found it after losing everything, after the shipwreck, after the noise was gone, after the world he clung to sank beneath him. It was in that silence that his clarity emerged. And you, sitting in the quiet of her absence, are no different. Your turning point won't come in an argument or a resolution. It will come when you stop needing the noise to feel solid. Chrysippus taught that virtue isn't measured by reaction, but by consistency. You don't prove your strength when she's warm, present, affectionate. You prove it when she isn't. When the warmth fades and your posture stays the same, that's the shape of your character. Not shifting, not shrinking, just holding, without complaint, without demand, without fear. So what does the most powerful man do in silence? Nothing. He doesn't fill it. He doesn't break it. He becomes it, not as a tactic, not as revenge, but as remembrance. Remembrance of the man he was before her silence mattered more than his peace. If she returns, let her find you where you've always been, unmoved, clear, grounded. And if she doesn't, let her silence walk out of the peace you refuse to surrender. Because strength isn't how you make her speak. Strength is how you keep your voice, even when no one's listening. You don't need to explain. You don't need to fight. You don't need to stay. Just breathe. Just be still. Just let her silence echo until it has no power left.